Well, let's turn in our Bibles to the book of Revelation, chapter 8, as we continue our journey through the Scriptures, coming down the home stretch here in the book of Revelation. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half hour. Heard a fellow try and prove that there would be no women in heaven using this verse. I accused him of false doctrine. Silence can be a very awesome thing. I waited for about 15 seconds. It seemed pretty long, didn't it? Can you imagine a half hour of silence? It sort of is portending these judgments that are coming, these awesome judgments that are going to be coming here in chapter 8. Just one of these things where during this time of silence, I'm sure there will be a lot of just things that are going on in our minds of the judgments of God upon the earth for those who have rejected Jesus Christ and have chosen to live after the flesh. After this, he said, I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. Now, Gabriel, when he announced himself, said, I am Gabriel, I stand in the presence of God. So we know that Gabriel is one of these seven angels. In one of the Apocrypha books, Ezra, he does list what he calls seven archangels, Michael and Gabriel and Raphael, and they give the other names of the other angels. We're not certain of that, but we do know of Gabriel, one of the presence angels. They're in the presence of God and given these trumpets and are about to sound the seven trumpets, which will bring really a group of judgments upon the earth corresponding with the trumpet sounding. Another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. It is interesting that our prayers unto God are likened unto sweet-smelling incense before the throne. So that in the Old Testament, you remember there was the altar of incense in the tabernacle. When Moses was commanded of the Lord to build the tabernacle, given the dimensions and the furnishings and all, he was commanded to make sure that you do it as you have been directed. The Lord more or less gave the plans to Moses, and he gave them to these skillful men who God had given abilities to put these things together. But the command was, make sure you do it according to the instructions. For the tabernacle was a model of what heaven is like. So if you are interested in sort of what heaven is going to be like, you can look at the tabernacle, and there in the tabernacle, it is a model of heaven. And we know that in the tabernacle they had the different furnishings, and one of them was the altar of incense, taking coals from the altar and going in before the altar of incense with their little censers and offering these sweet-smelling fragrance. And of course, the incense itself was especially compounded, and God, when he gave them the instructions of compounding it, he said that you weren't to compound it for any other use. This was to be exclusive for the worship of God. But the prayers of the saints were represented by this incense, the sweet-smelling savor before God. Interesting how that God treasures your prayers. They come up before God as sweet-smelling incense. And we find that in many places in the Scriptures. But here in heaven now, this is not in the tabernacle, but he speaks of in heaven there. They have the altar with their golden censers and much incense, that they should offer it with the prayers of all of the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. We sing, let our prayers rise as incense. And they do when we pray. It's just something that God enjoys, the sweetness of the prayers of his people. The smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer, filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquake, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Now, I would encourage you to sort of study these chapters that deal with the heavenly scene. We will be there, and you might as well acquaint yourself with a little bit of what's going on, so that it won't take you by surprise. You won't look like some country bumpkin in the first time in the city, or, ooh, wow, wow, you know, and they'll all know that you didn't do your homework. So just study it over, and when you get there and these things begin to happen, you say, oh, you know, watch those guys over there. They're going to, you know, and you'll know what's going on because you've done your homework and you've studied the events that are going to transpire there in heaven. Now the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. They were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees were burnt up, and all of the green grass was burnt up. So we can see that the results of these judgments will be against really the earth, and of course they have their effect upon men who are upon the earth. But a third part of the trees and all of the green grass burned up with the first trumpet. The second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And a third part of the sea became blood. A third part of the creatures which were in the sea that had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed. It's interesting when we get to the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth trumpet, the effects and the results are very similar to the vials of God's wrath that will be poured out in chapter 16. Whereas here in chapter 8 with the trumpets, the third part of the sea becoming blood and so